Thanksgiving at Grandma Ellen's house had always been a tradition carved in stone. Every year, 3 generations would gather beneath the old pitch roof of her colonial home in Vermont, where the scent of cinnamon, roasted turkey, and pine candles wrapped the walls like a second skin. That year, it was no different. On the surface, the family had trickled in throughout the morning. Cousins hugging cousins, uncles with their booming voices, aunts carrying pies still warm from the oven. Snow dusted the porch. Children played tag in the living room, while football murmured from the TV. Laughter echoed down the halls, and for a time, it felt like the world had paused just for this. My daughter, Ava, clung to my hand as we arrived. She was 7 years old, with wide, curious eyes and a quiet temperament that often made her fade into the background during chaotic gatherings like these. But today, she was excited. She had dressed herself in a velvet navy blue dress with a white collar, carefully chosen the night before. "Do you think Grandma will like it?" she had asked. I told her yes, of course, she would. Ellen greeted us at the door with her signature lipstick smile and a quick embrace that always felt more formal than warm. She gave Ava a pat on the head, the kind you'd give to a neighbor's child, not your granddaughter, and moved on to the next arrival. Still, Ava's eyes gleamed. She loved being part of something bigger, being surrounded by people, even if she wasn't the loudest voice in the room. Dinner was served promptly at 5 o'clock in the evening. The table groaned under the weight of dishes, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, sweet potato casserole, stuffing laced with sage. Ellen took her usual spot at the head of the table, raising her wine glass for a toast. "To family," she said, "to traditions that keep us together." The glasses clinked, and conversation resumed like a bubbling brook. After dessert, a trio of pies and homemade cookies. Came the moment the grandchildren had been whispering about all day. Gift time, Ellen's new tradition. It had started 3 years prior, when she decided that instead of saving her money for inheritance, she would begin giving it while still alive. "Memories while I'm here," she had said. And so, each Thanksgiving, she presented each grandchild with a token of her love. The children gathered in the living room, forming a semicircle at Ellen's feet. One by one, she called their names. First came Justin, her oldest grandson. She handed him a brand new iPad and a white envelope. His eyes lit up. Then Chloe and Ethan, twins, each received the same. Smiles, cheers, thank yous all around. Then Leah, then Connor, then Lil Zoe. The pile of gifts dwindled. Ava sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes wide, face expectant. The last name was called. The last gift given. Then silence. Ava blinked. A beat passed. She looked at me, then back at Ellen, waiting. Surely, she hadn't heard correctly. Surely there was one more. But Ellen stood and dusted imaginary crumbs from her skirt. "All right, everyone," she said. "Let's help with the cleanup." Ava remained seated, confusion flooding her face. Her lips parted slightly, then closed. She glanced down at her lap. No iPad, no envelope, no explanation. I felt a wave of cold rise from my spine. I rose and approached Ellen gently. "Mom," I said softly, "Ava didn't get anything." She looked at me, her expression neutral, as if I had pointed out a stain on the carpet. "Oh," she said, pausing. "Well, she's still young. She doesn't really need that sort of thing yet. But she's the same age as Zoe," I said, motioning toward her niece, who was already tapping away at her new device. Ellen shrugged. "It's different," she said. "They have a different relationship with me." I didn't know what to say. I stood there, mouth dry, heartbeat in my ears. I looked at Ava, who still hadn't moved. She wasn't crying. She was just still, her small frame hunched slightly, as if trying to disappear into floral couch cushions. I gathered her things quietly, heart pounding with a mix of shame and rage. I thanked Ellen stiffly and guided Ava to the door. Mark, my husband, trailed behind us, his jaw set but silent. The drive home was silent, except for the hum of the tires on the snowy road. Ava stared out the window, watching trees blur by in the darkness. Lights twinkled on distant porches. Somewhere, someone else's family was laughing over pie. She finally spoke when we were halfway home. Did I do something wrong? My breath caught. My fingers clenched the steering wheel. No, sweetheart, I said. You didn't do anything wrong. But in that moment, I knew the evening had done something to her. Something small, maybe. Something quiet. But something real. And it was just the beginning. The silence inside the car was no longer neutral. It had grown heavy, as if it carried the weight of all the unspoken thoughts swirling between us. Ava sat in the back seat, her forehead leaned gently against a window, eyes trained on the blurry trail of passing lights. Her breath fogged up a small oval on the glass, which she wiped with her mittened hand without looking. Mark kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles tight around the steering wheel. He hadn't said a word since we left his mother's house. I watched Ava through the rearview mirror, waiting for her to speak, to ask, to cry, anything. But she just sat there, too still for a child her age. Her silence was louder than any tantrum she could have thrown. I could feel my stomach knotting into itself. The night's events echoed in my mind, but I pushed them down, determined to hold myself together until we got home. We turned into our neighborhood, the streetlights casting long shadows across the snow-covered sidewalks. Christmas lights blinked on the houses, cheerful and oblivious. As we pulled into our driveway, Ava finally broke the silence. Did I do something wrong? Her voice was small, almost apologetic, as if she were afraid to disturb the peace any further. The question hit me like a cold slap across the face. No, I said, turning around to face her as soon as the engine shut off. No, sweetie, you didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing. She nodded once, not convinced, but not ready to argue either. She unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door, stepping out into the snow with slow, careful movements. Inside the house, she went straight to her room without being told. She didn't ask for her usual cup of warm milk. She didn't ask for a bedtime story. She just went to bed. I stood outside her door, listening to the creak of her mattress as she climbed in. I want to say something more, but I didn't know what would make it better. Mark stood behind me, arms crossed, looking tired. She'll forget by morning, he said. I turned to him, blinking. Forget? She's 7, he said with a shrug. Kids, bounce back. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. My jaw tightened. She was the only one who didn't get anything, Mark. Not even a card. Not even a thank you for coming. And she noticed. He looked away. I know. I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying it's not worth blowing up the family over. I shook my head and walked past him. I didn't want to fight. Not now. I went to the kitchen, pulled out a bottle of wine, and poured myself a glass with a hand that trembled slightly. Upstairs, the house grew quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, it accuses. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the blank wall, trying to make sense of it. Ellen hadn't even tried to hide what she did. She had looked at Ava and dismissed her like she didn't belong. And for the first time, I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. The next morning, Ava was up early. She had dressed herself again in the same navy blue dress. When I came into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table, staring at her cereal without eating it. Sweetheart, I said gently, you don't have to wear that today. I like it, she said. Maybe Grandma didn't like it yesterday. Maybe she will if I wear it again. I swallowed hard. Ava, Grandma did not give you something because of what you wore. That's not how this works. She nodded slowly, but I could see the seed of self-blame already growing in her. Children do that. They make sense of pain by turning it into something they can control. If they think they caused it, maybe they can fix it. I walked over and knelt beside her chair. Listen to me. Grandma made a mistake. Not you. And it's not something you can fix. She looked at me, eyes wide. But I said thank you and everything. I know, I whispered. I know you did. She didn't ask any more questions. But she didn't smile that day either. That afternoon, I texted Ellen. A short message. We need to talk. Can we speak privately sometime soon? I watched the little delivered icon pop up. Then nothing. No response. Not even the dots that signal someone is typing. I waited the rest of the day. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. Mark noticed I was staring at my phone a lot that evening. Still no reply, he asked. Nope, I said, not looking up. He sighed again, that same tired sigh. She's probably thinking about how to respond. You know how she is. Yeah, I said. I'm starting to. Later that evening, while folding laundry in the living room, I found Ava sitting quietly on the floor near the fireplace. She had a notebook open in front of her, drawing something with colored pencils. I leaned over and saw a sketch of our family, me, Mark, and Ava, holding hands under a tree. That's beautiful, I said softly. She smiled faintly, then pointed to the top of the page where she had written, "The people who love me." Something inside me cracked. I kissed the top of her head and excused myself to the bathroom before the tears started. I sat on the cold edge of the tub, clutching a towel, trying to breathe. That night, after Ava had gone to bed, I sat on the couch and opened a blank document on my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was going to write. A letter to Ellen? A message to the family? A list of all the small moments that had led to this one? Instead, I opened a private journal I had abandoned months ago and started typing. She asked if she did something wrong. Just that line. It stared back at me like a wound. I closed the laptop. The next day was Monday. Ava went back to school. As she walked into the building, she glanced back and waved. Her usual bounce was missing, but she didn't complain. I sat in the car after drop-off, watching other parents move through their routines. No one knew that my daughter had quietly been told she wasn't enough. No one knew what a 7-year-old girl was carrying around like a secret. On the way home, I stopped by a toy store. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I found myself in the electronics section, staring at a display of iPads. I picked one up, then put it back. I didn't want to fix this with a gadget. That wasn't the point. Instead, I went to the bookstore next door. I found a children's novel about a girl who finds her voice in a town that overlooks her. I bought it, and a blank sketchbook, and a set of watercolor pencils. That evening, I gave them to Ava. "These are for you," I said, "because you matter, and because I see you." She didn't say anything. She just hugged me, and in that moment, I felt the slightest shift, a flicker of healing, delicate and fragile. But I also knew this wasn't over. Not yet. It's strange how the mind begins to reorder the past when something finally snaps in the present. After that Thanksgiving evening and the silence that followed, I found myself tracing back through years of memories, moments that I had brushed aside before, now returning with new weight. They were fragments, small, quiet scenes that on their own might have seemed forgettable, but together, they painted a different story. I remembered Ava's 3rd birthday. Ellen had shown up late with a gift for our nephew, Justin, whose birthday had been weeks earlier. She handed him a wrapped box with a ribbon and said, "I didn't want to forget you." Ava had been standing right next to him, in a party hat, holding a balloon. Ellen had smiled at her, complimented her dress, but brought nothing for her. I had chalked it up to a scheduling mistake. She probably meant to bring something and forgot. I had told myself. Ava didn't notice then. She was still young enough not to expect anything from anyone in particular. But I remember that flicker of awkwardness in the room, how I had forced a smile and changed the subject quickly. Then there was the dance recital in kindergarten. Ava had worked for weeks to memorize her steps. She was so proud, so excited to show us all. The other grandparents had come early, brought flowers, and sat in the front row. Ellen arrived just as the performance was starting. She didn't bring flowers. She didn't even clap when Ava took her bow. I had asked her afterward if she enjoyed it, and she said, "Well, she's not really a performer, is she?" At the time, I told myself she meant it kindly. That Ava was just quiet, reserved, different from the other grandkids who loved the spotlight. But now I heard it differently, heard the disinterest, the judgment, the subtle dismissal, and the comments, always the comments. She's a little too sensitive. She's shy like her mother was. Remember how you used to hide behind your dad at family reunions? She's not really into sports like the boys. Maybe she'll be the artsy one. They came like passing observations, never cruel enough to confront outright, but always tinged with something beneath the surface. They were framing Ava not as an individual, but as an outlier, the quiet one, the different one. Mark had always told me I was reading too much into things. Mom treats all the kids differently because they are different, he'd say. She doesn't mean anything by it. And for years, I had convinced myself that was enough of an explanation. But it wasn't, because Ava had begun to notice. It started subtly. She would ask questions after family events. Why does Grandma always ask Justin about school, but not me? Or, why did she say Leah was a little princess? Doesn't she have more than one? I would answer gently, always trying to neutralize the sting. Grandma's just forgetful. She loves you, sweetie. She just shows it differently. But now, those explanations felt empty. And worse, I wonder if my attempt to shield Ava had only taught her to quietly accept what hurt. One evening, a week after Thanksgiving, I was folding laundry when I found an old drawing tucked into the bottom of Ava's drawer. It was clearly from when she was younger, maybe 5 years old. It was a simple crayon sketch of a house with smiling stick figures outside. All of them were labeled with names: Mommy, Daddy, Ava, Grandma, Justin, Chloe, Leah. But Ava's figure had no smile, just a small, round face with no expression. In tiny, uneven handwriting, she had written, "Sometimes Grandma doesn't see me." I sat down on her bed and stared at it for a long time. She had felt it even then. At school, Ava's teacher, Mrs. Lane, asked to speak with me one afternoon during pickup. She said Ava was doing well academically, but had been more withdrawn than usual. "She's very self-aware for her age," she told me. "Sometimes I see her observing the other kids, like she's trying to figure out where she fits. She's thoughtful, very kind, but lately she's been hesitant to raise her hand. I just thought you should know." I thanked her and nodded, unable to find the right words. I didn't want to cry in a hallway lined with cartoon turkeys and paper snowflakes. That night, I sat with Mark after Ava had gone to bed and laid it all out. Not just the Thanksgiving incident, but everything, the forgotten gifts, the comments, the dismissals. I brought up the recital, the birthday party, the drawing I had found. He listened, finally, more intently than he had before. "I didn't realize it went back that far," he admitted. "I always thought she was just awkward with Ava, because they didn't click the same way she does with the others." "Why do you think that is?" I asked. He shrugged. "Maybe because Ava isn't loud or playful like the others. She's, quieter, more sensitive. And that makes her less worthy of attention?" He shook his head. "No, of course not. I'm just saying Mom doesn't know how to connect with that kind of kid. She likes big personalities. She was never good with subtle." "Then maybe she should learn," I said, "because Ava is 7. She doesn't need to be loud to be loved." Mark rubbed his hands over his face. "What do you want to do?" "I want to talk to your mom again. Not just text. A real conversation. And I want her to understand what she's doing." He hesitated. "She's not going to take that well." "I'm not looking for her approval," I said. "I'm looking for my daughter's peace." The next day, I called Ellen. This time, she picked up. I asked if we could talk. She said she was busy, but maybe could find time over the weekend. I told her it was important. There was a long pause. Then she agreed. That Saturday, I left Ava with Mark and drove to Ellen's house alone. I parked in the driveway, the same driveway where so many family memories have been made. But this time it felt different, heavier. I rang the bell, and she answered with her usual briskness. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. We sat in the sunroom, a space filled with floral cushions and faded photo albums. She poured herself tea, but didn't offer me any. I took a breath. "I want to talk about Ava." She raised her eyebrows, like she had expected small talk. "What about her?" "You hurt her," I said, keeping my voice steady. "At Thanksgiving, but not just then. Over time, she started to notice things I've tried to protect her from." Ellen sighed. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being a mother," I said. She asked me if she did something wrong. "After Thanksgiving, she thought she had upset you." "She's sensitive," Ellen replied with a wave of her hand. "She takes everything too seriously." "She's 7, I said, "and she's watching. She knows she's being left out. Ellen crossed her arms. I treat all my grandkids with love. I'm not going to apologize for having different bonds with each of them. Different bonds don't mean different worth. I said. There was silence, the kind that dares you to push further. She draws pictures where she's the only one not smiling. I said. She hears when you compliment the others and say nothing to her. She sees when you bring gifts for them and ignore her. And you may not think it matters, but it does. It matters to her. Ellen didn't respond. She looked down at her cup of tea, her face unreadable. I'm not here to fight, I said, but I am here to tell you that something has to change, because I will not keep bringing her into a space where she's treated like she doesn't belong. I stood up. I hope you'll think about what I said. I left before she could answer. Driving home, I didn't feel victorious. I felt drained. But beneath that exhaustion, there was something else, resolve. This time, I wasn't going to let silence be the answer. The tension didn't dissolve after I confronted Ellen in her sunroom. If anything, it seemed to have solidified into something heavier, more rooted. There was no follow-up call, no text, no gesture of reflection or remorse. Days passed, then a week, and while I had hoped for a sign that she had taken my words to heart, nothing came. I didn't tell Ava I had spoken to her grandmother. I wasn't sure it would mean anything yet. Instead, I watched my daughter carefully, studying the way she moved through her days, quieter, yes, but still trying. She wrote thank you notes to her teachers and colored cards for her classmates, always thinking of others. I wondered if she was trying to earn what had been withheld from her, even if unconsciously. The moment I decided I needed more than silence came one evening after dinner. Mark was upstairs helping Ava with a puzzle when my phone buzzed. It was a group message from Ellen to all the grandkids' parents, a photo of a stack of Christmas gifts lined up neatly beneath her fireplace, tagged with names: Justin, Leah, Chloe, Ethan, Zoe. No mention of Ava. Nothing had changed. I took a screenshot and showed it to Mark later that night. Maybe she hasn't finished wrapping yet, he offered. But even he didn't sound convinced. She included names in the caption. Mark, I said, our daughter's not there. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'll talk to her. No, I said, I already did. It's not enough anymore. I need to understand. I need to hear her say it. He looked at me for a long moment and finally nodded. All right. I called Ellen the next morning. This time I didn't ask. I told her I was coming over. She didn't argue. It was a cold Tuesday, with frost on the lawn and a gray sky that felt like it hadn't woken up fully. I drove with the heater on high, my fingers drumming the steering wheel, my thoughts a mix of exhaustion and resolve. When I arrived, Ellen opened the door without her usual smile. Coffee, she asked. No, thank you. We sat in the same sunroom as before, but this time I didn't wait for pleasantries. I need to ask you something, I said, looking her directly in the eye. She nodded slowly, guarded. Why, Ellen? Why do you treat Ava differently? She blinked, clearly not expecting the question to come so plainly. I've never said I don't love Ava. That's not what I asked. She sat back in her chair, her eyes flickering toward the window, as if hoping to find an answer out there. She's different. I leaned forward slightly. Different how? She doesn't connect the same way the others do, Ellen said. They laugh with me. They hug me. They tell stories and play games. Ava just sits there quietly. It's like she's not interested. She's 7, I said, careful to keep my voice steady. And she's been picking up on your rejection for years. Maybe that's why she's quiet around you. Ellen frowned. I don't reject her. I just don't feel as close to her. It's not personal. It's just how things are. Not personal? I repeated. You left her out. In front of everyone. Do you know what that does to a child? I'm not cruel, Ellen said defensively. I'm just practical. I give where there's connection, where there's a relationship. And you don't think you had any responsibility to build that with her? I asked. She's a child. She needed you to make space for her. You're the adult. There was a pause, a long one, and then for the first time, something like honesty crept into Ellen's voice. She reminds me of someone. I waited. You. I froze. When you were younger, Ellen said, you were always so sensitive, always reading too much into things. I didn't understand you then, either. You took everything personally. You always wanted to talk about feelings, about fairness. I didn't know how to parent that. And now, Ava's the same. I didn't expect the sting of that comparison. I had worked so hard to protect Ava from the same hollow spaces I had grown up navigating. And now, to hear confirmed that Ellen saw her through the same lens, that the pattern was repeating, it hit something raw in me. She's not me, I said, my voice lower now but firmer. She's her own person. And even if she were like me, that's not an excuse. Ellen looked older in that moment, not just physically, but emotionally, like someone who had built walls around herself for so long she didn't know where the doors were anymore. I didn't mean to hurt her, she said quietly. But you did, I said, and now you have a choice. You can keep doing what's comfortable for you, or you can try to change. Because Ava is not going to keep walking into that house if she keeps being made to feel invisible. There was another pause. Ellen looked down at her hands. I don't know how, she admitted. I softened just a little. Then start small. A note, a call, a moment of effort. She doesn't need an iPad, Ellen. She needs to be seen. She didn't reply. I stood up, not waiting for a promise. I hadn't come for her apology. I had come for clarity. And I had it now. When I got home, Ava was in the living room, curled up on the couch with her new sketchbook. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Did you talk to Grandma? She asked. I nodded. Yes, I did. Is she still mad at me? No, sweetheart, I said, sitting beside her. She's not mad. She just doesn't understand everything yet. But I talked to her, and I think she's starting to listen. Ava nodded, accepting the answer without asking for more. She went back to her drawing, which was of a small tree with deep roots and tiny leaves beginning to sprout. Is that our tree in the backyard? I asked. No, she said. It's a new one. It's just starting to grow. I reached for her hand and held it gently. And in that moment, I realized something important. I couldn't make Ellen change, but I could show Ava that silence wasn't strength. That being seen was a right, not a reward, and that her worth would never be defined by someone else's ability to recognize it. 2 days after my conversation with Ellen, a card arrived in the mail addressed to Ava. The envelope was thin, light blue, and bore Ellen's precise handwriting. Inside was a single folded sheet of stationery and a small sticker of a snowflake, loosely tucked in, not pasted, not part of the message. Ava opened at the kitchen table, her eyes moving slowly across the page as she read silently. I watched her closely, waiting to see how she'd respond. When she was done, she handed it to me without saying a word. It read, Ava, I hope you're having a nice week. I heard you like to draw. Maybe sometime you can show me your art. Stay warm. Love, Grandma. It was short, detached, almost clinical, but it was something. Ava didn't smile or react. She quietly peeled the sticker from the table and stuck it to the corner of her sketchbook. She didn't say sorry, she murmured. No, I said gently. She didn't. Ava didn't ask any more questions. She turned back to her coloring, humming softly under her breath, and that small act of acknowledging what wasn't said spoke volumes. My daughter was learning to name the void, to give language to the spaces where people fail to show up. It terrified me how early that lesson had to come. The next weekend, Mark suggested we visit his brother's house. It had been months since we'd all gotten together, and the cousins were having a small holiday craft day. At first, I hesitated. Ellen would be there, but Ava seemed eager when we told her. She had started asking about Leah and Zoe again, wondering what they'd been up to. So we went. The moment we walked in, Ava clutched her gift bag in both hands. A few handmade bookmarks she had created using watercolor and glitter. She had made one for each cousin, and even one for Ellen, though she didn't say that aloud. She placed the bag carefully on the coffee table, while the other children ran around, showing off reindeer headbands and throwing foam snowballs at one another. Ellen was already seated in the corner of the room, talking to Mark's sister, holding a glass of cider. She noticed us but didn't rise. Her greeting was a short nod. Ava glanced at me, then walked over and stood quietly beside her grandmother, waiting for a break in the conversation. When Ellen finally noticed, she said, "Oh, Ava, hello. Are you having fun?" Ava held out one of the bookmarks. "I made this one for you." Ellen took it, but barely looked at it. "That's sweet. Thank you." No compliment. No follow-up. She turned back to her conversation before Ava could respond. Ava stood there for a moment, then walked back toward me, the edges of her mouth pulling into a small, strained smile. I crouched down to her level. "You okay?" She nodded. I think she liked it. She just didn't say. I hugged her. "You did something kind. That matters." The rest of the afternoon passed in that same tone, Ella maintaining a stiff cordiality, never once reaching for Ava's hand, never sitting with her during the crafts or asking her about school. She helped Leah paint her snowman. She laughed when Ethan accidentally glued his fingers together. She didn't even glance at the drawing Ava made of the family gathered around a fireplace. Later, in the kitchen, I pulled Mark aside. "I know you saw that," I said. He sighed, his eyes on Ava across the room. "She's just not like the others," he said quietly. I stared at him. "Did you really just say that?" He blinked. "That's what Mom told me. Years ago. That's what she always says when I ask." "And you believed her?" "I didn't want to believe it," he said. "But I guess I didn't know how to change it either." "You don't have to change Ava," I said. "You have to challenge the idea that she needs to be anything other than who she is. That's the problem." He didn't respond. That night, after we got home and Ava had gone to bed, I sat with Mark in the living room. The tree lights flickered gently in the corner. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw how much this avoidance had worn on him too. He loved his daughter, I knew that, but he was afraid of confrontation, afraid of disrupting the version of family he'd grown up with, even if it meant tolerating quiet cruelties. "She doesn't have to be the loudest in the room to deserve love." I said, "I know. She doesn't need to fight for space. That's our job, to make it for her." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I wish it didn't have to be so hard." "It's harder for her," I said. He closed his eyes. "I'll talk to my mom." "When?" "This week. I promise." He kept that promise. 2 days later, Mark called Ellen and asked to speak in person. I didn't go. He said he wanted to do it alone. When he came back, his expression was unreadable. "She doubled down," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. Said she treats Ava the same as she treats all the grandkids, but that some just don't bond the same way. I told her that was a lazy excuse, that she has never made an effort to know her, and she didn't like hearing it, but I think it landed. I told her we wouldn't keep coming around if Ava kept being treated like a footnote. I exhaled. What did she say to that? She said she was sorry if we felt that way. I scoffed, but, he added, I could tell she was rattled. I think she expected me to defend her, not challenge her. Later that week, another envelope came in the mail. This time it was thicker. Ava opened it after school. Inside was a set of stickers, a printed crossword puzzle, and a longer note. "Ava, thank you for the bookmark. I put it on my dresser. You're very thoughtful. I don't always know the right things to say, but I want you to know I see that you're creative and kind. I hope we can spend more time together. I'd like to learn what you like. Love, Grandma." Ava read it twice. Then she looked at me. "Do you think she means it?" "I think she's trying," I said, "and that's a start." Ava didn't say more, but that night, she asked if we could call her grandmother to say thank you. It wasn't warmth, not yet. It wasn't trust, but it was the beginning of something neither of them had ever had before: intentionality. And sometimes that's where healing begins. The house was quiet when the email came in. It was a Tuesday evening, and the sun had already tucked itself behind the trees, leaving only a soft orange glow through the kitchen windows. Ava was upstairs in her room, working on a new collage she had been assembling from cutout magazine clippings and scraps of wrapping paper. Mark sat at the dining table, scrolling through his laptop as he finished reviewing contract from work. I was finishing the dishes, half listening to the rhythmic hum of the dishwasher and the faint creak of pipes expanding in the walls. Then his voice broke the stillness. She sent another message. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands quickly, walking over. Mark tilted his screen so I could read it. It was a short email from Ellen, and this time it was addressed to both of us. Mark, I thought about what you said. I'm not sure I agree with everything, but I do want things to be better. I'd like to invite you, Ava, and her mother to Christmas dinner this year. Just you three. No big group. I thought maybe a quiet evening might be a better way to get to know her. Let me know. Ellen. I read it twice. It wasn't warm. It wasn't emotional. But it was deliberate. A private dinner. Just us. No cousins, no chaos, no distractions. Ellen was clearly attempting something, though what exactly wasn't yet clear. Mark raised his eyebrows. What do you think? I think it's the first olive branch she's offered without being asked. I said, but I don't trust it. He nodded slowly. Same. We didn't respond right away. We waited a full day, letting the idea marinate, testing our instincts against the silent air between us. When I asked Ava how she felt about spending a quiet Christmas evening with Grandma, she surprised me with a shrug and a single sentence. If it's just us, I guess that's okay. So we accepted. On Christmas Eve, we arrived just after 5 o'clock in the evening. Ellen's house was lit in gold and red, the front porch lined with battery-operated candles and a fresh wreath. There was no other car in the driveway, no sign of the larger family crowd that usually filled her house with chatter and footsteps. It was just her. She opened the door in a deep burgundy sweater and offered us a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but it was more effort than before. Ava held my hand tightly as we stepped inside. Hi, Grandma, she said quietly. Hello, Ava, Ellen replied. Merry Christmas. The living room was quiet, the fireplace glowing, and the dining table was set for 4, one extra plate that surprised me until Ellen explained, I figured your mother might want to eat before heading out. She didn't ask questions beyond that. She was, perhaps, trying not to say the wrong thing for once. Dinner was quiet at first. Polite. Ellen had made baked ham, roasted carrots, scalloped potatoes, and warm rolls. Ava complimented the rolls, and Ellen beamed at that. It was small, but something in her softened. After we ate, she brought out a single box, wrapped in silver paper. This is for you, Ava, she said. Ava looked at me, and I gave her a slight nod. She unwrapped it carefully, pulling out a small wooden box with a gold clasp. Inside was a set of colored pencils, high quality, the kind you find in art supply stores, not toy aisles. Nestled beneath them was a sketch pad with her initials embossed on the cover. Ava looked up. Thank you, she said. Ellen smiled. Your dad told me you like to draw. I didn't know. There was again effort, stiff, unfamiliar, but real. I do, Ava said. She held the box carefully, like it might break if handled too quickly. I was never much of an artist, Ellen admitted, but I used to write poetry. When I was a girl. Ava perked up. Really? Ellen nodded. I still have a few old notebooks somewhere. You should show me sometime, Ava said. Something flickered in Ellen's eyes. Not quite emotion, but possibility. It would have been a perfect ending, if it had ended there. But after Ava went to the living room to quietly sketch while the adults finished their tea, Ellen lowered her voice. She's doing better than I expected. I looked at her. Better? She's just more open tonight. I always thought she was so closed off, but maybe I just wasn't seeing the right things. Mark shifted in his chair. Or maybe you weren't looking. Ellen stiffened, but she didn't argue. I'll admit, she said, I didn't know how to reach her. I kept comparing her to the others. Why? I asked. Her answer was quiet. Because the others are easy. Ava isn't. Easy for who? She didn't reply. Mark leaned forward. I need to say something, he began, his tone low and unusually firm. I've let this go on too long, because I thought it would resolve itself. But it didn't, and I realized something that I don't think I wanted to admit. Ellen looked at him cautiously. You made me feel growing up like being noticed meant being the loudest, or the smartest, or the most convenient. So when Ava wasn't any of those things, not in the way you expected, I ignored what she needed too. I didn't push back. I didn't stand up for her, because I learned that it was easier not to stir things up. His voice didn't tremble. It was clear, measured. I watched you favor the kids who mirrored you. I watched Ava shrink herself to fit into a space she thought would get her love. And I let it happen. There was a long pause. Ellen's face didn't move, but her hands tightened around her teacup. "She's not like the others," she said again, quietly this time, almost like a confession. "She's not," Mark replied, "and that's exactly why she deserves more, not less." Ellen didn't defend herself. She sat still. For once, maybe she heard it. When we left that night, Ava hugged her grandmother without being prompted. Ellen hugged back. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed. But something had shifted. On the ride home, Ava said, "That was the nicest she's ever been." It felt different. I agreed. Mark looked over at me from the driver's seat. "I meant what I said," he said. "I know. I should have said a long time ago. But you said it now." And that mattered, because silence too often is louder than cruelty, and breaking it, finally, was the beginning of something Ava had needed for years. She hadn't been too sensitive. She hadn't been too quiet. She had simply been herself. And now, someone had finally said out loud that she deserved to be loved exactly as she was. The days after Christmas passed in a kind of gentle rhythm. The snow thickened outside our windows, and the lights from the tree glowed softly into New Year. Ava spent more time than ever with her new sketch pad, not just drawing, but writing small captions beneath each illustration. Quiet sentences, sometimes just fragments. "This is the feeling of a good day. A house that knows your home." Even quiet people make noise in their own way. I read them carefully when she let me, and I realized she wasn't just making art. She was documenting how she saw the world, how she made sense of it. One morning, as I was packing her lunch, Ava came into the kitchen, holding a piece of construction paper folded like a greeting card. She handed it to me without speaking. On the front, in colored pencil, was a drawing of a woman standing beside a chalkboard, smiling gently. Inside, she had written, "Dear Mrs. Lane, thank you for seeing me." I blinked at the words, trying to absorb their full weight. "She's been nice to me all year," Ava explained softly. "She notices when I'm having a bad day. She always lets me take an extra minute when I don't know the answer right away. She never makes me feel behind." "You want to give this to her?" I asked. Ava nodded. "And I want to give her something else too." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a wrap package. I hadn't seen it before. She had done it all on her own. Inside was a paperback children's novel, lightly used, with a small post-it note stuck on the inside cover. "This is the book that made me feel brave." I knelt beside her. "That's one of your favorites," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why I wanted to have it." Later that afternoon, I emailed Mrs. Lane, letting her know Ava had something for her and asking if it would be okay. She replied almost immediately, saying of course, and added a line that made me smile. "Your daughter has a gentleness that fills a room in a way noise never could." That evening, Mark came home with a stack of books from a second-hand shop. "For Ava," he said, placing them on the table. I asked the clerk for stories about kids who feel out of place, and ones where they went anyway. I watched Ava flip through the titles with wonder, her fingertips brushing the covers like they were delicate artifacts. I could see it in her eyes. The way her father's sudden, specific interest in her inner world was something she hadn't expected, but deeply appreciated. As January unfolded, Ava began volunteering during lunch recess. Once a week, her teacher let her help out in the younger kids' classroom, handing out snacks, organizing crayons, sitting beside the more nervous kindergartners during story time. It was a quiet job, but one she took seriously. "She has a gift," Mrs. Lane told me in passing one morning. "She doesn't take over. She just shows up in a way that makes others feel safe." I started keeping a journal, not for me, but for Ava, a place to record the small, remarkable things she did. Not because she needed validation, but because I wanted her to grow up with evidence, proof that even when others overlooked her, she was always becoming someone of depth and light. In late February, our school district hosted a local kindness initiative. Kids from every school were nominated by staff to receive small awards for their impact on others, not for academics or sports, but for presence, empathy, compassion. When I opened the email from the principal, my hands shook. Ava has been selected to receive a Heart of the School certificate for her consistent acts of kindness and emotional intelligence. They want to present it at the next school assembly. When I told her, she didn't jump or cheer. She simply smiled and asked, "Do I have to speak?" "No," I said, "only if you want to." She thought about it. "Maybe I can just say thank you." "That's perfect," I said. The day of the assembly, she wore her navy blue dress again, the same one from that Thanksgiving so long ago. But now it fit differently, not just in size, but in meaning. It was no longer the dress she wore while waiting to be chosen. It was the one she chose to wear while being seen. Mark took the morning off work to come. We sat together in the middle row of the auditorium, surrounded by parents and grandparents. When Ava's name was called, a few kids clapped louder than others. One she helped find books in the library or shared her crayons with at lunch. She walked calmly to the stage, accepted the certificate, and spoke into the microphone with a clear voice. "Thank you. I try to be kind because I know what it feels like when people aren't." There was a pause, a murmur from the crowd. The teachers stilled. Then applause. No roaring cheers. No wild standing ovation, but a sincere, steady, respectful clap that spread slowly across the room. And in that moment, Ava stood taller than I had ever seen her. Afterward, Mrs. Lane handed her a small envelope with a gift card to a local bookstore and a handwritten note. "You remind me that empathy is a superpower. Never stop using it." We went out for pancakes to celebrate. Ava ordered blueberry, which she never did. Mark let her pour syrup for all of us, pretending she was a queen of the breakfast table. We laughed. We told stories. We gave her the stage without asking her to perform. When we got home, there was a message waiting on our answering machine. It was Ellen. "I heard about Ava's award. Someone from the neighborhood mentioned it at the post office. That's really something. Tell her I'm proud of her, and tell her that maybe one day I'd like to hear what kindness means to her." I played it for Ava, watching her face as she listened. She didn't say much, but later I found her in the living room, carefully writing a reply. She wasn't sure if she'd send it. She wasn't ready yet. But the fact that she was willing to write it all told me everything I needed to know. Strength doesn't always arrive loudly. It doesn't always demand attention or take up space. Sometimes it grows like ivy, slow, deliberate, rooted in quiet intention. Ava had found her strength, not in proving her worth to others, but in recognizing that it was never theirs to grant in the first place. The next Christmas was supposed to be different. That was the promise, or at least a quiet expectation, after a year of slow, careful repair. The private dinner the year before, the letter, the pencils, even Ellen's tentative voicemail about Ava's award had suggested the beginning of a shift. Not dramatic, not sweeping, but enough to believe we might one day sit at the same table, without the weight of history pressing between us. That December, Ellen returned to hosting the full family gathering. Mark and I hesitated when the invitation came in the mail. Thick cardstock with red foil lettering and a sprig of holly printed across the top. She had written all the grandchildren's names individually beneath their parents, including Ava, for the first time. A small but not insignificant gesture. Ava noticed. "She wrote my name," she said quietly as I showed her the envelope. "She did." I replied, "What do you think?" Ava didn't answer right away. She was older now, a little more discerning. She had learned to study not just what people said, but what they meant. Still, when she nodded, I knew she had decided to go, not because she expected anything, but because she no longer feared the silence. Ellen called us the week before the dinner. "There'll be a gift exchange after dessert," she said. I prepared something small for each of the kids. Just tokens. No pressure. I thanked her and didn't ask questions. I wanted to believe she had learned. I wanted to trust that her efforts were not performative, that they stemmed from recognition, not guilt. The house was full when we arrived. Laughter poured from the hallway as children ran through clusters of coats and boots, the smell of roast and pine mingling in the air. Ava clutched a tin of handmade cookies she had baked the day before. One for each cousin, labeled with their names in gold ink. She had tied the tin with string herself. Ellen greeted us with her usual reserved hug, but she bent slightly to greet Ava at eye level. "Merry Christmas, Ava. You look very grown up." "Thank you," Ava replied, and handed her the tin. "These are for everyone." Ellen took it with a smile that flickered at the edges. "You're always so thoughtful." I watched the exchange closely. Measured. Polite. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold. That had to count for something. Dinner was loud, festive, full of overlapping conversations and too many side dishes. Ava sat beside her cousin Zoe, who chatted happily about a recent dance recital. I noticed Ava listening with interest, occasionally asking quiet questions, nodding, smiling. She had found a way to exist in the middle of chaos now. Not as someone trying to compete, but as someone claiming space in her own way. After dessert, Ellen called for everyone to gather in the living room. A stack of small, uniform packages sat beneath the tree, red paper, silver bows, one for each grandchild. Ava leaned against me gently as we found a seat. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her posture shift. Alert, cautious. Ellen began distributing the gifts, calling names in no particular order. Justin, a puzzle cube. Chloe, a charm bracelet. Ethan, a mini science kit. Zoe, a sketch pad with neon markers. Leah, a reading light shaped like a unicorn. One by one, the children opened their gifts, cheering and thanking Ellen with the easy enthusiasm of kids who have long known they are welcome. Then silence. There was one package left under the tree. Ellen looked at it, then glanced at the group. She called another name. Connor, a snow globe with a tiny house inside. Ava's name had not been called. She sat up slightly, hands folded in her lap, her face unreadable. I felt the tension rise in my chest like smoke in a sealed room. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, but didn't say anything. Maybe they thought Ellen had simply forgotten. Or maybe they didn't want to ruin the mood. I leaned over to Mark. Did she forget? He stared at the last box being opened. "No," he said. She didn't. The realization hit like ice. This wasn't a mistake. Ellen had made a choice. Ava stood up quietly and slipped out of the room. No scene. No words. Just absence. I followed her, my feet heavy on the wooden floor. I found her in the guest bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet lid, her dress gathered in her lap, her head bowed. She was crying without sound, her shoulders barely moving. I knelt in front of her, placing a hand on her knee. I said. I saw everything." She looked up, eyes glistening. "I thought it was going to be better this time," she whispered. "I know, sweetie. I did too. I didn't even care about the gift. I just wanted her to remember." "You didn't deserve that," I said. "None of this is your fault." Ava wiped her nose with the back of her hand, nodding slightly. "I want to go home," she said. "Okay," I replied. "We're going." I stood and helped her up. We didn't say goodbye. Mark met us at the door with the car keys already in hand. He had seen enough. The ride home was silent, but it wasn't the same silence as a year ago. It was resolute, not defeated, decided. When we got back, Ava went straight to her room. She didn't cry again. She didn't draw. She lay in bed, her hands folded across her stomach, staring at the ceiling. I sat beside her until she fell asleep. Mark came in and sat down at the edge of the bed. She said she just wanted to be remembered. I told him. He looked at the floor. She was... What? She was remembered, he said, and still left out. That's worse. Neither of us slept much that night. The next morning, we called Ellen. She didn't answer. I left a message. Short, controlled. You don't get to do that to her again. You don't get to invite her, speak to her, accept her gift, and then discard her like that. We're done pretending this is fixable with polite conversation. We're not coming back. We're not playing along. I hung up. Ava didn't ask about Ellen for days. When she finally did, it was during a walk in the park. She was throwing pebbles into a frozen pond, her breath fogging in the cold. Do you think she just doesn't like me? I think she doesn't know how to see you, I said. But that's not about you. Ava nodded slowly. I hope she figures it out, she said. But if she doesn't, I'll be okay. And in that moment, I believed her. A few weeks passed after Christmas dinner, and Ellen never called back. Not to explain, not to apologize, not even to defend herself. The message we had left, clear, calm, and final, seemed to be met with silence, the kind that confirmed what we already suspected. There would be no confrontation, no sudden realization, just quiet distance, a growing space between us that no longer felt worth crossing. Ava, to her credit, didn't bring her up again, at least not directly. She focused on school, on her sketching, on planning small projects of her own. Her teacher, Mrs. Lane, had invited her to help organize a classroom reading nook for younger students. Ava took the task seriously, carefully choosing titles she remembered liking when she was little and placing bean bags in the corners for comfort. She called it the soft corner. She said it's for kids who need a place to breathe. Mrs. Lane told me one afternoon, eyes shining. At home, Ava started keeping a box under her bed. I noticed it one day while putting away laundry, a shoebox wrapped in plain brown paper. When I asked about it, she simply said, "It's where I put things I don't want to forget." I never opened it without permission, until the day I found the letter. It was a Saturday morning. Ava had gone to a friend's house for a birthday sleepover, her first one ever. She was excited but nervous. So we packed her bag together, triple-checked the gift, and rehearsed polite phrases just in case. After dropping her off, I came home and decided to tidy up her room, mostly calm my own nerves. While changing her sheets, I accidentally knocked over the shoebox. The lid popped off, and several neatly folded papers scattered onto the carpet. I knelt to collect them, intending to simply place them back, when one unfolded in my hand. At the top, in Ava's careful handwriting, were the words, "To Grandma Ellen." I sat on the floor and read it slowly. "Dear Grandma Ellen, I don't know if I did something wrong. If I did, I wish you would tell me. I always try to be kind and do my best. I gave you a bookmark because I thought maybe you'd like it. I baked cookies so I wouldn't show up empty-handed. I didn't care about the gift, not really. I just didn't want to be invisible again. When I saw that I didn't get anything, I tried really hard not to cry because I didn't want to ruin Christmas. I told myself maybe you forgot, but I don't think you did. I think you decided. Sometimes I think maybe I'm too quiet or not as fun as the others. Maybe I don't say the right things. Maybe I'm not the kind of granddaughter you wanted, but I'm still a person. I still have feelings. And I notice things, even when people think I don't. I want to tell you this, but I didn't know how to say it out loud, so I'm writing it down. I don't know if I'll give it to you, but I needed to get out of my heart. Love, Ava." I didn't realize I was crying until one of the tears hit the paper. I folded it again carefully and placed it back where I found it, then sat there on the floor for a long time, staring at the box, stunned by the grace and clarity of my daughter's words. There had been no drama in her letter, no accusations, just a child, trying to understand why the person she called Grandma had looked straight through her for so long. When Ava returned the next day, flushed and happy from her sleepover, I hugged her a little tighter than usual. "Did you have fun?" I asked. She nodded. They let me help decorate cupcakes. I made one that looked like a galaxy. I smiled. Of course you did. Later that evening, after dinner, I asked her about the shoebox. "Can I ask you something?" I said, "I saw your letter, the one you wrote to Grandma." Ava paused and nodded. "I figured you might. I didn't send it." "Why not?" I didn't think she'd read it. I sat beside her on the couch. "Would it help if I did?" She looked at me, curious. "I already did," I added. "But if you want to talk about it, I'm here." Ava thought for a moment, then said, "It helped just writing it. That way, it's not stuck in my chest anymore. I wrapped my arm around her shoulder. You did the bravest thing a person can do. You told the truth. It still hurts, though, she whispered. I know, I said, but the pain isn't who you are. It's just something you're carrying for a little while. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. Do you think she'll ever care? She asked. I don't know. I admitted, but whether she does or doesn't, it doesn't change the fact that you're valuable and you're deeply loved by us, by your friends, by your teacher. You're seen every day. Ava didn't respond right away, but she reached for my hand and held it. That week, she added something new to her box, a small folded paper labeled Letters I Won't Send But Needed to Write. She told me it was a safe space, not for secrets, but for honesty. Sometimes, she said, you just need to say things for yourself, even if no one else hears them. I watched her becoming someone quietly powerful, someone who didn't need approval to feel whole, who didn't chase after those who withheld affection. She was building an inner world that didn't collapse when others failed to meet her where she was. At school, she presented a short story during Open Share Week. It was about a girl who was invisible to everyone in her town, until one day she realized she could see herself without needing a mirror. Her teacher told me later, it was the kind of story that makes a room go still. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, Ava turned to me and asked, do you think other kids feel like I did? Some do, I said, probably more than you think. Then maybe I should write something for them too. And so she began her next project, a handmade booklet titled For the Quiet Ones. Each page was a message. You matter, even if they don't say it. Not all love looks the same, but your heart knows what's real. It's okay to outgrow people who never saw you. She didn't write Ellen's name once, but every word was a response to her, a response Ellen would likely never read. But Ava didn't need her to, because some letters are not for reconciliation. They're for release, and Ava had already moved on. The invitation came in early spring, a pastel-colored envelope, floral details around the border, and in the center, Ellen's handwriting once again. You're invited to our annual family brunch, April 12th at noon. Every household received one, including ours. And once again, Ava's name was included, scrawled carefully beneath ours, as if inclusion on the envelope alone might serve as proof of change. Mark placed it on the kitchen counter, unread. She really thinks we'll just show up like nothing happened, I said. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw. She thinks we're bluffing. Then she doesn't know her granddaughter at all. It had been 3 months since the Christmas dinner. 3 months since Ava slipped from the living room unnoticed and cried in the guest bathroom. Since we called Ellen and told her we were done pretending. Since the silence that followed. Ava hadn't asked about her grandmother since. She had tucked the pain away somewhere private, sealed it with the clarity only children who've had enough can find. She didn't seem bitter, just resolved. And that quiet strength made our decision easier. We declined the invitation. I typed a message to Ellen that morning. We won't be attending the brunch. Please do not continue to include Ava in spaces where she's not treated with consistent care. Until there's genuine acknowledgement of the harm done and a commitment to change, we're stepping away. We wish you well. I read it twice, then hit send. Mark didn't ask me to soften it. Not this time. 3 days later, Ellen called. I let it go to voicemail. Her tone was tight, not furious, but indignant, like someone whose authority had been questioned publicly. I don't understand what this is about anymore. Ava was included. She was invited. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Why punish the entire family over one misunderstanding? I played the message once for Mark. He shook his head. She still thinks this is about the gift, he said. She doesn't get that it's not about a thing, it's about a pattern. I didn't reply to the voicemail. There was nothing left to explain. The boundaries were not threats. They were fences meant to keep peace in, not people out. But word got out. By Easter weekend, the phone calls began. First from Mark's sister, Sharon. She's upset, she said. You blindsided her. No, I said calmly. We told her directly. More than once. Well, now she's telling everyone you're keeping Ava from the family. I'm protecting her, I corrected. And if that bothers anyone, they're welcome to ask why it was necessary. Sharon hesitated. Don't you think this is a bit extreme? Do you know what happened at Christmas? She forgot a gift. No. She excluded Ava again intentionally. She looked her in the face, accepted a handmade present from her, then gave everyone else something and left her with nothing, after a year of promising change, after asking for another chance. There was silence on the line. I didn't know that, Sharon said finally. She didn't tell you. No. She made it sound like Ava just wasn't into the celebration. She was never given a chance to be. That was the beginning. More calls followed. Some supportive, some thinly veiled with judgment. A few cousins messaged me privately. I always thought something fell off. She made me cry at my graduation. It was always her way or nothing. Stories started to surface. Not just about Ava. Not just about us. Ellen's image, once pristine in the family's collective mind, began to show cracks. Tiny at first, then more visible. A pattern of subtle favoritism, of controlling behavior dressed up as tradition, of affection offered as reward rather than inheritance. But not everyone wanted to hear it. Mark's older brother called one night. He didn't say hello, just launched into it. Is this really worth it? He snapped. You're tearing the family apart over what? A kid's feelings. Mark, sitting beside me, reached for the phone. I'm going to stop you right there, he said, because I've let a lot slide in the name of keeping the peace. But not this. You don't get to minimize what happened to my daughter. Not anymore. She's a kid. She'll get over it. No, Mark said firmly. She'll remember it. And she'll remember who stood up for her and who didn't. There was no reply. I'm done pretending that silence is noble, he added. If protecting my child cost me a few holiday invites, so be it. The call ended with no resolution. But it didn't need one. The divide had formed. Easter came and went. The brunch happened without us. Photos were posted online. Smiling cousins, pastel dresses, plastic eggs hidden in Ellen's yard. We didn't comment. We didn't explain. Ava never asked. Instead, we spent that Sunday at a small botanical garden just outside of town. Ava brought her sketch pad, capturing tulips and budding cherry blossoms in soft watercolor strokes. She asked questions about soil, about root systems, about what kind of flowers come back stronger every spring. That afternoon, she handed me one of her sketches. A single flower blooming between two larger ones, not quite the same shape or color, but just as bright. It's called The One That Kept Growing Anyway, she said. I smiled. That's beautiful. She shrugged. I just draw what I see. Later that week, we received a card in the mail. No return address, but Ellen's handwriting unmistakable on the front. Inside, there are only 4 words. I hope you reconsider. No apology, no reflection, just an appeal, still framed around her desire, not Ava's healing. I placed it in the drawer and left it there. There will be no reconsidering, because for the first time, our daughter wasn't navigating uncertainty alone. Her voice had been heard, her pain had been honored, and the adults around her had stopped making excuses for patterns that needed to be broken. The family didn't fracture because we spoke out. It fractured because too many had learned to be quiet when love came with conditions. But Ava was learning something better. That real love shows up, without negotiation, without qualifiers, without disappearing when it becomes inconvenient. The first unexpected message came in May. It was from Leah's mother, Mark's cousin Danielle, a quiet woman, always polite at family gatherings, rarely the one to cause a stir. Her text arrived on a Wednesday evening, simple and direct. I heard what happened. I just wanted you to know I've noticed things too. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure what to make of it. Then another came minutes later. Leah asked me why Ava didn't get a gift at Christmas. I didn't have an answer, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't the first time something didn't sit right with me. I typed back, "Thank you for telling me. That means a lot." She replied, "You're not alone in this." It was the first confirmation that our silence breaking had sent echoes outward, that others had seen but stayed quiet, that someone finally said, Enough, and in doing so, loosened something in the air. Within a week, I received a message from one of Mark's nieces, then another from a cousin I barely knew. Small notes, short observations, but all sharing the same undertone. I always thought maybe it was just me. She never came to my graduation, but made a big post for my brothers. When I was little, I remember her telling my mom that girls should be tougher like the boys. I cried in my room that night. What started as a single fracture began to spider across the family foundation. And it wasn't just the younger generation noticing. Mark's sister, Sharon, called again. She told me once that my son would grow up being shy, but never encouraged it, just push him away from anything quiet. I listened. She used to say things like, "Some kids are just more durable," like love had to be earned through resilience. I said nothing. I didn't have to. She makes people compete for her attention, Sharon continued. But never directly. It's always under the surface. Praise doled out based on convenience, not closeness. That's the pattern, I said. It's not new. It's just been normalized. Sharon was quiet for a long time before whispering. Maybe we all let her get away with it too long. Mark had his own ripple moment weeks later. He received a call from his younger cousin James, who rarely spoke up in family matters. "I told Grandma I was gay last year," James said. She said, "That's not something you need to announce. Just live your life quietly." I haven't been back to her house since. Mark was stunned. She said it like she was being generous. James added, like not cutting me off was proof of her open-mindedness. But I felt like she wanted me to disappear. Just quietly accept my place on the margins. He paused. I think Ava is just the first person she did it to who had someone willing to say no. By summer, Ellen had started trying to reestablish her image. She sent out birthday cards earlier than usual, posted more often in the family group chat, commented on photos of nieces and nephews with exaggerated enthusiasm. But it felt like damage control, not remorse. Still, some clung to her version of events. One aunt wrote a long post online about the importance of family forgiveness, without naming anyone. It was filled with phrases like, "Let's not let misunderstandings divide us," and "Some people are too sensitive these days." It didn't take a genius to know who it was aimed at. I didn't respond. Others did. Danielle replied, "Accountability isn't division, it's protection." James commented, "Silence helps no one, especially not the quiet ones." Bit by bit, the story shifted, not because we were fighting to control it, but because truth, once spoken, invites others to speak too. And in the middle of it all, Ava remained steady. She spent the summer volunteering at the library, helping with story time and shelving picture books. She started a small kindness project with her classmates, leaving anonymous notes of encouragement in lockers on Fridays. She made a list of things that made her feel grounded: sunlight, soft socks, people who keep promises. One day, she came into the kitchen holding a paper she had written for school. The topic had been someone who inspires you. She chose her teacher, Mrs. Lane. "She showed me that kindness doesn't have to be loud." Ava wrote, "That being calm doesn't mean being weak. And that paying attention to people is one of the bravest things you can do." Mark read it twice. "She's teaching all of us," he said quietly. Ellen, meanwhile, sent one final letter, a handwritten card in her usual formal cursive. To Ava, "I regret that we've grown apart. I hope someday you'll understand that I always care for you, even if I didn't show it the right way. I would like to see you again if you're open to it. No expectations, just a visit. A letter isn't enough, I know, but it's what I can offer right now. With care, Grandma Ellen." Ava read it in silence. Then she folded it and placed it in her box beneath her bed. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just said, "I'm not ready yet." And that was enough. Healing doesn't come on someone else's timeline. Forgiveness is not owed. Trust, once fractured, must be rebuilt brick by brick, and only if the foundation is worthy. Ava had found her center, and no letter, apology, or gesture of regret would push her to abandon it. The ripple effect had done more than stir up old wounds. It had cleared the surface. What lay beneath was raw, but honest. And sometimes honesty is what finally makes space for something real to grow. Summer waned into early autumn, and the house settled into a quieter rhythm. School had resumed, and with it, the subtle transformation in Ava became more evident. Not in loud declarations or sudden shifts, but in the small, steady ways she carried herself differently. She moved through her days with more self-assurance, not seeking approval, just existing in full color, as if a light inside her had finally grown comfortable being on. One afternoon in early October, Ava came home with a bright orange flyer folded into her backpack. It was a notice about a local youth initiative that encouraged students to propose small projects benefiting the community. The prize was modest, a $100 grant in recognition at the town's fall festival. But the emphasis was on ideas that make people feel seen. Ava laid the flyer on the kitchen table and said, "I want to apply." I looked at her, surprised. "You do?" She nodded. "I've been thinking about it since Mrs. Lane handed it out. I already know what I want to do." I sat down beside her. "Tell me." She pulled out a notebook she had been keeping since summer, one I hadn't seen. On the cover, she had drawn a single phrase in bold black letters. "You matter anyway." Inside were sketches, handwritten notes, and cut-out phrases taped from magazines. It was a plan, simple but powerful. She explained that she wanted to create kindness envelopes for kids at school who might feel invisible. Each envelope would include a handwritten note, a small drawing, and a token gift. Something thoughtful but small, like a sticker, a handmade bookmark, or a positive message on a decorated card. "But not with my name on it," she said. "I don't want credit. I just wanted to show up in their lockers or desks like magic, like someone saw them." I was quiet, overwhelmed by the depth of it. She tilted her head. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay," I said. "It's beautiful, and it's exactly what this community needs." We worked together to help her type up the application. She insisted on writing the essay part herself, only asking me to proofread. Her final paragraph read, "I know what it feels like to be left out, but I also know what it feels like when someone does something small that makes a big difference. I want other kids to feel like they're not forgotten, even if they're not the loudest or most popular. Everyone deserves to feel seen just for being themselves." We submitted the application on a Thursday. The following week, she was called to the front office during lunch. When she came home, she was holding a certificate in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. She had won the award. "They picked me," she said. "They're giving me the grant." I hugged her tightly. "What are you going to do first?" "Buy supplies," she said without hesitation. "Good paper, nice pens. Maybe get help from some friends who want to make their own envelopes too." We went to the art supply store that weekend. Ava moved through the aisles like someone on a mission. She selected colors intentionally: soft purples, gentle blues, warm oranges. She tested pens for smoothness. She debated which stickers would be encouraging without feeling cheesy. Mark followed us quietly, letting her lead. At checkout, the clerk asked, "Big project?" Ava nodded. "It's for kids who need to know they matter." The clerk smiled. "We all need that sometimes." By the end of the month, Ava had assembled 50 envelopes. She personalized each one slightly. Some had quotes, others had affirmations. Some included drawings of quiet moments: a kid sitting by a window, two hands holding a tree growing on a hill. She distributed them anonymously with the help of Mrs. Lane and a few trusted classmates who had agreed to keep the secret. The reaction at school was immediate, though no one knew the source. Kids began talking about the kindness letters showing up in their desks. I got one that said, "Your voice is important even if it's soft." Mine had a drawing of someone sitting alone at lunch, and it said, "Someone notices. You're not alone." The school counselor reached out to me in an email. These letters have made an impact we didn't anticipate. We've had students ask how they can help. Some even started writing their own. Whoever began this ripple thanked them for us. I showed the message to Ava. She smiled. "It's working." One afternoon, she came home and placed a small stack of envelopes on the table. "These are the extras," she said, "for anyone who needs one at home or somewhere else." She began mailing a few to community centers and libraries. We added a few to the free little library box near the park. Mark dropped one off anonymously at his office after hearing a co-worker talk about how lonely his teenage daughter had been feeling. Ava didn't ask for recognition. She didn't post about it, but her quiet movement began to take root. Local news caught wind of it through the school. They contacted the principal, who asked if Ava would be willing to be interviewed. She thought about it carefully. "I don't want to be famous," she said, "but I want people to know they can do this too." So she agreed on her terms. No face on camera, no last name, just her words. When the story aired, it opened with a narrator saying, "In a world where children are often told to speak up, one student has learned how to speak through kindness instead." They showed her hands assembling the envelopes, close-ups of her drawings, and excerpts from her notes. "You are not invisible. Your softness is not a flaw. Being different is not the same as being wrong." It was the most honest story I had ever seen on television. The next morning, Ellen left another voicemail. I saw the news piece. That was beautiful. She's beautiful. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything anymore, but I wanted to say I'm proud of her. I really am. Mark played it twice, then deleted it. Ava never asked if Ellen had seen the segment. She didn't need to know. Her actions had transcended their story now. That weekend, Ava and I were walking to the grocery store when we saw a little girl holding an envelope, one of Ava's. She had found it at the library. The girl's mother was reading the note aloud. It says, "You don't have to be loud to make noise. Your kindness echoes." Ava looked up at me and smiled, not saying a word, because she didn't need to be seen anymore to believe in her worth. She had become the very thing she had once needed, and now she was giving it to others, without expectation, without demand, just presence, just power, just love. Ellen's house stood quiet that winter. No holiday lights blinked from the windows. No wreath hung on the door. The driveway, once marked by the heavy tread of visiting family cars, remained undisturbed to the first snowfall of December. Only the mail carrier came and went. Even the neighbors had begun to notice. She didn't throw her usual Christmas brunch this year, one of them told Mark while shoveling their walk. She used to send out invitations by Halloween. Mark nodded, offering nothing more than a polite shrug. He hadn't spoken to his mother since the voicemail after Ava's community project aired. There had been no follow-up, no visit, no gift sent out late as an afterthought, just distance. That year, Christmas at our house was smaller, but fuller somehow. Ava helped decorate every corner, placing paper snowflakes on the windows, crafting handmade place cards for our modest dinner table. She even baked cinnamon cookies from scratch, carefully measuring each spice, her tongue between her teeth in concentration. She did not mention Ellen, but Ellen did not forget. We learned through Sharon that she had been asking questions. "She keeps saying she wishes things had turned out differently," Sharon said during a phone call one afternoon. But then she follows it up with, "I didn't do anything that terrible," or "She's blowing us out of proportion." It's like she wants to feel sad without admitting the cause. I sighed. She wants reconciliation without reflection. "She's lonely," Sharon added. "She won't say it, but it's obvious." Justin barely calls anymore. Zoe's family didn't visit this Thanksgiving. Danielle stopped replying to her messages. "She built this," I said. "She built the house, then locked the doors behind her." It wasn't said with cruelty, just clarity. A few weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. Not handwritten, not personalized. A generic printed card with a snowy cottage on the front and the words, "Thinking of you this holiday season," embossed in silver. Inside, Ellen had written 3 short lines. "I hope you are all well. Wishing Ava a peaceful Christmas. I miss her." No signature beyond her name. I placed the card on the mantle, but didn't mention it to Ava. Some gestures are too thin to cast shadows. This one barely carried weight. Christmas morning came with soft snow and warm cinnamon. Mark made breakfast while Ava unwrapped her gifts, books, art supplies, a letterpress set she had been eyeing for months. She opened each one with quiet gratitude, her face lit with the kind of joy that asked for nothing more than sincerity. She made cards for us using her new press, each one embossed with a different phrase. Thank you for listening. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for staying. After dinner, we sat together by the fireplace. The house was silent, the lights low. Ava was curled under a blanket, sketching something in her notebook. Mark sipped tea beside me, one arm draped behind my shoulders. Do you think she'll ever really understand what she did? I asked, not looking away from the fire. I don't know, he said, but I don't think Ava needs her anymore. He was right, because by then, Ava's world had widened far beyond the walls of a single house in Vermont. She had created something enduring from the pieces of her pain, a network of kindness, a voice rooted in empathy, not silence, a way of seeing others that Ellen had never learned, and perhaps never would. In January, a local journalist contacted us again. They wanted to do a follow-up story on Ava's kindness envelopes, which had since inspired similar efforts in other schools. Ava was hesitant at first. Only if it helps someone else feel like they're not alone, she said. The second segment aired mid-February. This time, they used her voice, not her face, just her voice, reading from one of her notes. You do not need to be approved of to be valuable. You do not need to be included to belong. You are enough, even if they don't say it out loud. A week later, Ellen showed up at Mark's office without warning. She was dressed neatly, her hair pinned up, her face pale. She asked for a few minutes. He hesitated, then let her in. She asked about Ava, he told me later. She said she didn't expect to be forgiven, but she wanted to understand more. She said she's been reading the school's website updates. She said she didn't know. She didn't want to know, I said. Maybe, Mark replied, but I think she does now. Or at least, she's starting to. Did you tell her what Ava needed back then? I told her Ava needed a grandmother, not a judge, not a critic, just someone who saw her. And did she hear you? He nodded. I think she did, but she also cried when she realized it was too late. That spring, Ellen sent another card. This one was different, not a greeting card, but a letter, 3 pages long, handwritten. I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was being fair by letting relationships form naturally. I thought if someone didn't seek me out, that was the end of it. I didn't know how many things I missed while I was waiting to feel comfortable. I didn't see that some children don't demand love. They wait for it. And by the time I realized Ava was waiting for mine, she had already learned not to need it. That will haunt me, not because I want her to forgive me, but because I know I had a chance to love someone fully and I didn't take it. She ended the letter with a simple line. If she ever wants to talk, I'll be here. But if she never does, I understand. Ava read it one evening in early April. She was 13 now, taller, more assured. She sat at the kitchen table, reading it once, then placing it gently back into its envelope. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She said, "It's strange. I used to wish you would say those words. But now that she has, I just feel, okay, how?" I asked, "Okay, I don't need anything else from her." She paused. She gave me silence, and I gave that back. But then I turned it into something else. "You turned it into a movement," I said. She tilted her head. I turned it into a voice. Mine. We kept the letter in her box, not as a token of reconciliation, but as a reminder that healing, when it comes, doesn't always end in reunion. Sometimes it ends in release. And Ellen, what she got in return was not revenge. It was absence. It was space. It was a quiet echo where a connection used to be. And in the center of that silence, she had to face herself, not as the grandmother she imagined she was, but as the one who'd been shown, gently and truthfully, what her absence had cost. She got the chance to change. But she didn't get to erase what had happened. That was Ava's power now. Not the power to punish, but the power to walk forward unburdened.